This is the Pubs and Pints Podcast. This podcast encourages open conversations where guests freely share their views. Their thoughts and opinions are solely their own and are intended for discussion purposes.
So I'm just going to do a quick little intro. Chickie Donohue, Inwood guy, U.S. Marine, merchant mariner, a bar owner, Sandhog, local 147 union delegate, and is widely known as the man behind the world's greatest beer run ever. Chickie, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. How's the weather down there?
It's cold, right?
Yeah, it's supposed to. I heard it was going to be like 27 degrees in Miami.
Oh, God.
On Sunday.
Oh, maybe. Yeah. They do that just to scare the people out.
Yeah. Get out to the store and buy things.
Yeah.
Get the milk and bread. So I know you've done countless interviews about the beer run in Vietnam, and we're going to touch on that. But what I'd like to do is first talk about Inwood. I'd like for you to describe like the vibe growing up in Inwood, like what kind of neighborhood it was. My wife is from Woodside in Queens, and I know that was a real, very, very Irish. You know, it had some German, some Italian, but it was very predominantly Irish neighborhood. And they're very, very close. And I know Inwood is very much similar to that. So tell us the vibe, the friendships you had. You know, everybody knew everybody, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, you know, the first thing about living in any neighborhood in New York City is the ethnic makeup of the neighborhood. It makes for the restaurants, makes for the what's sold in the delis and all of that, you know. So Inwood was primarily an Irish and Jewish community, which meant that I grew up with a lot of Jewish foods, particularly snacks and, that was great. But I thought everybody lived like that. I didn't know that we were a little bit different. And we had a woods there. You could actually, it was years later, I had a place up in the Catskills, so you could, if you wanted to walk off into the woods looking for deer or something, you could do that. You could do that in Inwood. You could walk up into the woods, and it was woods. There was no buildings up there or anything like that. No vehicles, no nothing. And so I thought, again, all neighborhoods had that. So, but it was just a great neighborhood to be out. There was 8, most times 9 people in my family living in a 2-bedroom apartment. You couldn't spend all of your time indoors. You had to be out. And that was, we were surrounded by the Harlem River on the east and the Hudson River on the west and Spike and Dival in the middle. And again, we had football fields, had a Gaelic football field, baseball fields, tennis courts, handball courts. As a matter of fact, again, we did things, we thought everybody did it. Like I was excellent, may I say myself, handball player. And we played with a little black ball, which is, they do in the old country, I guess. As against some neighborhoods, they would play with one of them pink Spaldings. That would be sissy handball. You wouldn't be caught dead in Inwood playing with a Spalding. We also swam up in Spike and Dival on the Manhattan side under the Henry Hudson Bridge.
But there's cliffs there, right? Isn't there like rocks there you can jump off of?
Yeah. That's what we call Geronimo. It's on the other side. It was on the Bronx side of the Spike and Dival. You could climb up on those rocks and jump in. Some guys actually dove. I jumped off it. I never dove off it there. I dove off the Manhattan side. Not that was too high to go diving. And we used to go up there and perform for the circle liners that came through there. The cut was only maybe 100 yards wide, if it was that wide. So you could actually see the people on the circle liner, and if you knew somebody was going to be there to be looking for you, hey, Chickie, and you could see them.
Oh, that's great.
I yell back and forth.
That's great.
And I learned how to swim there at the age of 5 in Spike and Dive. London, there's a little island there. And they had 2 little concrete bridges that you could go under and wade in the water. You didn't have to worry about the current. Then as you became a more proficient swimmer, you could go outside and swim in the current. I believe to this day that swimming from the age of 5 in that polluted Harlem River has sort of given me some kind of...
That's how you built up your immune system.
Exactly. I believe that.
Yeah, I believe that 100%.
And I've said that to a number of the doctors over the years. And while they looked at me like, yeah, but they couldn't argue against it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It does make sense. You got to be exposed to certain things. You become immune.
Yeah.
That Spite and Dival area, tell me if I'm wrong. There's a story about, you know where that name came from?
Yeah, it's Dutch. It stands for, they tell me, in spite of the devil.
Right. And the devil being the redcoats. It was like...
that's why it was an Irish neighborhood.
Yeah, it was. That's what it's not what I was told. I think there's a monument. I remember years ago, there's a monument on the Manhattan side that actually tells the story. And during the Revolutionary War, it was kind of like the Manhattan version of Paul Revere. The guy was swimming across that area and he drowned. He was going to warn the people of Manhattan that the British were coming. Yeah. And he drowned. And it was said that he drowned in spite of the devil. And that was Dutch for Spite and Dival. That was what I read. So I wanted to confirm that with you.
The local Democratic Club in Inwood, back in the 40s and the early 50s, again, when I was a kid, they were a very popular place. In addition to the bars, you went to that club to get jobs, most if not all of the city jobs. And it was like Inwood Tammany Hall. And they would have a big event every June. They called it the June Walk in the park down by the Spite and Dival, and at the bottom of what they called Dead Man's Hill. And there was a big old tree there. And that's where they say Peter Minuet bought Manhattan Island from the Indians.
Oh, okay.
In June, they celebrated that there. And every June, up until the 30s, there was Indians still living in those woods there. Not hiding in any sense. They lived there. And actually, when Good Shepherd Grade Grammar School opened, the first graduating class, I think, was in 27. There was Indians there, and they went to Good Shepherd School, and they used to bring in, like, things. Instead of bringing in an apple for the nuns that were teaching us, they would bring in, a little snake or, some little animal that lived in the woods. And then in the 30s, that's when they built all of those facilities for football and basketball and tennis and handball. And that's when they ran the Indians out.
Okay.
But up until the 30s, there was a Native American in Inwood Hill Park.
Is there any specific fond memory you have of? I know you talked about swimming and everything. Is there any other fond memories you have of growing up in Inwood?
Baker Field, Columbia University football team, and other games that they played up there. And the rowing club was there, Columbia University. And in those days, every year, Columbia played against Army in football and Navy. And every year, Army or Navy, whichever year it was, they never played at Baker Field in the same year. One year, Army would play in Baker Field, and the next year, Navy would play at Baker Field.
Okay.
And they would march up Seaman Avenue. They'd form up right in front of my house there, 27th and Seaman Avenue, and march up 3 blocks, like to see the cadets or the midshipmen. And I think it was 1947, Army was ranked number 1 in football, and Columbia either beat them by a point or tied them. which was unheard. They never won a game. We joke about it. They almost never won a game after that. You would meet people at these games, and for years, I never missed a game there. I hung out there. I wound up working there at the age of about 12. The president of Columbia University at the time sat on one side of the field, but he was open to everybody, and I used to go over and talk to him and everything. And I looked like Howdy Doody. At one time, that was one of my nicknames, Howdy Doody. Had red hair, freckles, and he got a kick out of Howdy Doody. And then at halftime, he'd walk across to the Corps of Cadets when the Army was there, and the same thing when the Navy was there. His name was Dwight Eisenhower.
Really?
Really? I knew Eisenhower when I was 10 years old. Yep.
Wow. That's a great story, Chick. That's a great story.
The Inwood story.
Let's get into, some people listening might not actually know your story. So you're hanging out in Doc Fiddler's in Inwood. Was that your local pub? Is that the pub you always went to with your buddies?
Yes and no. At that time, I was a seaman, and I would sail away for 3 or 4 or 5 months, sometimes 6 or 7 months, and I'd come back, and I'd always come back like in the late spring and spend the summer hanging around New York, Rockaway, Inwood, and then as it started getting cold, go down and take a ship, sail to South America or Africa or the Caribbean, wherever. And so that's the life I lived for maybe 5 years there. But that played into my story because I went to Nam a couple of times, and there was nothing nice about Nam other than the weather. The weather was pretty good, but I could find the weather in the Caribbean. I had my choice of where to go. Oh, while I was away, young Tommy Minogue was killed. Missing those funerals, I felt guilty. And then when I was walking through Central Park that one afternoon, I'll never forget it, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of people were there demonstrating against the war, Viet Cong flags, and all the other nasty things. And I was just furious that we were burying kids in Inwood. And these, I can't say much nice things about them at all. And then I'd go up to the bar the same day, and Doc and Lynch was tending bar. George Lynch, we called him the Colonel. And and remember in those days, the news came on at 6 o'clock, and they had the demonstration. And it was devastating to sit there with your friends and knowing there was friends right there. Tommy Minogue lived in the next building, right next to Doc Fiddler's when he was alive, when he was a kid. The movie, it was true that Lynch said, he asked to borrow my Siemens papers. It was an ID card. George was much bigger than me and heavier and older, and he could have never passed for me. And I said, George, they'll never take. Besides, you don't know anything about an engine room, all right? So he says, well, somebody's got to go over there and buy all them guys a drink and let them know that we're behind them and they see this shit on TV. I don't know if it was after my 5th beer I said I was going. I've been there before. I'll go. And
you're going to bring your buddies a beer.
Yeah, bring the buddies a beer. And Lynch knew how to lock me down on it. The next day, he had a couple of the mothers in the bar to give Chickie the correct address of their boys. And Mrs. Collins, Chuckles was my age, and his younger brother, Tommy was over there. And Mrs. Collins with the brogue said, Chickie, she gave me these rosary beads. She says, I don't know if Tommy brought them, but please make sure when you see him to give him these rosary beads and everything. So I went, and I didn't think it was going to work, but it did. So I went into that bar, and the guy says, are you going on a ship? The only place I could have been going was the only pier there, and I had bags,
Yeah.
I said, yeah. He says, where are you going? I said, I'm going to Vietnam. You going to Vietnam? I says, yeah. He says, what are you going to do over there? I said, well, I'm bringing supplies over and some beer for my buddies. your buddy's over in Vietnam? I says, yeah. So he got the story out of me, and he went in the back, and he come out with a couple of cases of beer, and he says, here, take these with you. So I had plenty of beer, but it was a long trip. It was a slow boat to China, South Pacific being very warm. I drank most of the beer before I even...
So you get to Vietnam now, and now you're getting off the ship, and people are looking at you in your civilian clothes and saying, "What's this guy doing here?"
No, Quinoi was a port, obviously, and most of the ships were in the harbor, not at piers, and that's where Collins was. I didn't know it at that time, but when I finally found him, he was on one of those ships out in the bay guarding it. Any of you guys know Tommy Collins from New York? Yeah, we know Tommy. How do you know Tommy? I said, I'm looking for him. He says, well, you're in the right boat. He says, you see that boat we're going right over there, the ship? Yeah. We're going to pick him up. His shift is over. We're going to relieve him. The launch took me to that next ship, and some guys got off to go up to relieve the guards that were there, and one of them was Tommy. And he's saying, Chickie, is that you? Yeah, Tommy. What are you doing here? I brought you rosary beads. Your mother said you left them home, or something like that. And so you can just imagine what went on after that. Back to shore, drinking in the bar, then to the barracks.
That's such a small world, though, that he's in the spot where you pulled in?
Yeah. And the bit about the officer came in. I don't know if you saw the movie.
Yeah.
When the officer came in and said, what's going on here? That was fairly accurate. And that's where the guys, they told me, just like in the movie, he thinks you're a CIA guy. I said, CIA guy? Why the hell would he think I'm a CIA guy? Well, look at you. You're dressed in civilian clothes. You don't see civilian clothes around here. So I saw Collins, and the next guy on my list was Dugan. The nuns got me into alphabetical order, all right? And
okay.
And I said to the Texan, I said, do you know Charlie Company, the first whatever, but I'm reading the military address. Yeah. I said, where can I find them? They're up in Conte, or wherever it was, up in the mountains. So I said, do you know how I can get up there? He said, yeah, why? I said, well, I don't know. I'm just trying to get up there, find my buddy, blah, blah, blah. Maybe I said he was my stepbrother or something, He said, well, you come up with me. How do I go with you? He says, well, you be on a tarmac tomorrow morning at 0800. I got my plane. You can come on my plane. I'll bring you up there. And that's how I got away from the port. And once I got away from the port and up into the mountains and hills and jungles, whatever, there was no seamen there. There were no American civilians there. And if they were, they would be CIA. Or some other federal agency.
That's great.
And I learned it that first night from those guys, just like it showed in the movie. That was very accurate. And I said, oh my God. But I also knew growing up in New York with all the cops, if you ever impersonated a cop, you could be jammed up.
Right.
So I never told anybody I was a CIA guy. Never did I tell anybody that while I was there.
I picked that up in the movie, Chick. I picked that up in the movie, and I'm saying to myself, he's using words whenever he's asked. He's using words that aren't, you're not lying.
No.
But the person asking you the question just said, all right, this guy's CIA.
If I spoke to just a GI, all right, and it was just him and I'd tell him the truth, all right? But if I'm talking to an officer, he's going to do something responsible. So I say, Colonel, Major, I'm sorry. I'd love to tell you the truth. But if I told you, you wouldn't believe me.
Which is the truth.
Which is the truth.
That's the best part.
Yeah.
That's the part. If I told you, meanwhile, if you said, if I told you that I was here just to bring beers to my friends, you wouldn't believe me.
Who is this guy? You know, I said, I don't know, it's just some guy. I mean, and then he said, oh man, you guys again, like I was a CIA guy. And he turned around and walked away. Took the first plane up to the mountains. And then I went and found the barracks where Dugan would have been living, but they had left. They all moved up north. And the supply guy was there. Tim, the sob story, you know. And he said, I'll tell you what, he said, you can write him a note if you want and say you got here, and I'll make sure he gets it this afternoon. And I looked at the guy and I said, wait a second. You don't even know where he is, just up north somewhere. But you can get him a letter this afternoon. Not tomorrow, this afternoon. He says, of course. How can you do that? I said, well, we got a 1,300 mail run going. Okay, can I get on that 1,300 mail run? So I went back down to the airport in the mountains. And I was hustling because it was getting close to 1 o'clock. And it was a good mile and a half through the jungle. Nothing in that jungle, just a dirt road, not a piece of concrete, not a lamp, not a wire, nothing, not a house, nothing. And I'm going down there and just praying to God that some vehicle going the same way. There was. And I flagged it down. And the guy says, yeah, what's up? I said, I got to get down to the 1,300, the mail run at 1,300. Oh, you better jump in. Come on, we'll drop you off. So I jumped in, and the guy says, what are you doing over here? And I was in civilian, you know, I get up. And I said, hey, and the guy stopped, turned around. Chickie, how the hell did you get here? It was McClune. He was on my list. All right.
How does that work? I don't understand how that could possibly happen.
I think we'll find out in the next life.
I don't understand that. That is a small world. To bump into the guy that you're looking for, he's just driving by?
Not even driving by. There's nothing to drive by. He was coming from the base through the jungle down to the town, and the airfield was just before the town. Him and his buddies were going into town to party. And there was nobody passing either way. It was just that one vehicle in that mile and a half. And it's him. So the first two guys, I really didn't even have to look for.
That's
Collins. He was getting on that same launch. The boat was only about a 40-footer.
So what? Wait, did you see Dugan yet, or you already saw Collins, and then you saw McClune?
Yeah, but that was by accident.
And that was by accident.
Yeah, I was going to see Dugan. Alphabetic. I saw Collins first. I meant to see Dugan second, but I ran into McClune. And who was last? Pappas. There was two GIs sitting on there's no seats like in a regular airline. It's like a bench. So the guy, hey, looking at me. I'm in my outrageous shirt. He says, what are you doing here? Who are you? I said, I'm over here looking for some buddies of mine. I have a list of them, and I found two of them already, and I'm on my way to find the guy up. I said, do you know Charlie Company? And maybe it was the 1st or the 8th Battalion, I don't know. I knew the address then. He says, I'm in Charlie Company. We're both in Charlie Company. All I got to do is follow this guy. I don't have to talk to nobody. Wherever he's going, I'm going. Okay? So the one guy, he loved it. He loved it. He had a smile on his face. I could tell. He would have been the type of guy I'd be hanging out with. We're beating the system somehow. All right? We're not getting nothing out of it, but we're beating it.
Yep.
But the other guy was scared. He said, hey, I don't want to know nothing. He realized I was totally illegitimate. All right? So he wanted nothing to do with me, the second guy. But the first guy was, okay, you just follow me. Don't get too far behind me, I said, yeah. We get off the plane, and it was like a PC. We call it Marine Corps, like a pickup truck there. And they guys jumped in the back. And I don't know if you were in the military, but in the Marine Corps, if there was a truck moving, you wanted it to stop. You just hit the side of the truck, slap it, all right? Yep. And the guy would stop. And then if it was okay to go,
Okay.
He would go. He wouldn't even have to. All right.
Yeah.
So as soon as the truck started to move, I was standing right by it, and I slapped the fender. Bang! Stop. I jumped in. Banged it again 2 times, and I went.
You're on your way.
They're taking me with them. So they went up to a little French chapel, like up in the mountains and the hills there. Beautiful, that part of the country. And it must have been 100 helicopters all around there. And I told the guy who was scared in front of the other guy who wasn't scared, listen, I'm not going to be doing no talking to you while we're there. I'm going to act like I don't even know you guys, all right? But I'm going to follow you. That's all I'm going to do. I won't ask you no questions. Don't worry about it. I don't even want to know your name. You don't need to know my name, all right? So the one guy says, yeah, sure. Yeah, no trouble. No trouble. The other guy says, I'm just, okay, I'm not having nothing to do with this. You know, so fine. Okay. So they went up into a tent. And they were in there about 5 minutes, 10 minutes. They come out. And they're walking back down. And I said, what's going on? To the good guy. He says, we got a 1800 mail run going. And they got a Huey. They're going to take us up in the Huey with the mail. I said, okay, good. Then I went into the tent. I said to the guy, you got an 1800 mail run going? Yes, sir. So I said, well, put my name down and I got to get up there. He said, was it LZ Jane? Yeah, that's right, sir. I said, well, put my name down on there. Donohue, John Donohue. So he says, John Donohue. What's your rank, sir? I said, I'm a civilian. Civilian? Well, I don't know, sir. You're going to have to speak to Major Meeker or something like that. I said, Major Meeker? Like I couldn't pronounce his name. I said, where do I find this guy? Now I'm acting like a wise guy because I think I'm winning, all right? And I hear a guy behind me says, who has to speak to Major Meeker? He was Major Meeker. And he was the only other guy in the tent. He walked in while I was having this conversation. So I said, my name is Donohue, John Donohue. I got to get up to, I got to see somebody up in LZ Jane. And I was telling the corporal here to put my name on the manifest. He says, what do you got to go up to do in LZ Jane? What's going on in LZ Jane? I said, well, Major, you know, I got to see this. I got to see somebody about some business. And he says, what do you mean? You can't tell me? I said, Major, if I told you, you wouldn't believe me anyway. He says, you fucking guys are all alike. So,
You're one of those guys. Oh, you're one of those guys.
you know, you guys are all alike. So he says to me,
It's the truth.
did you eat? Yeah. He says, did you eat? I says, no, come on, we'll have some dinner. So he thought he was going to talk me into it. He never got it out of me. You know, we just had a nice thing, and thank God, 1800, I got him. Then we landed, and the sergeant, he says to the two guys, who's this guy? And one guy says, I don't know him. I never met him before. I got nothing to do with him, Sarge. The other guy says, Sarge, you got to hear this guy's story. I told Sarge the story. He said, oh, he loved it. The Sarge loved it, all right? And he said, where's Dugan? And they said he's out in an ambush post. He says, get him in here. Dugan comes in, and he says, yeah, Sarge, you know, and he must have been maybe, I'm guessing, a half a mile out into the boondocks, right? And he says, oh, I didn't want you in here. This guy did. He says, Chickie Donohue, what the hell are you doing here? I said, I come over here to see you. I brought you a beer. No, really? Who are you with? I'm with you. I'm with nobody. Just me and you. He said, no, Chickie, really? What's going on? Dugan was born in the same house that I grew up in.
Oh,
He
wow.
lived on the first floor. I lived on the third floor.
Okay.
So I knew the kid since he was in diapers. All right?
Yeah.
And the sergeant says, hey, listen, it's going to get dark, so you better get him out of here. He can't come with me. I said, yeah, well, you ain't staying here. I ain't going to answer for him. He's yours. You take him. So that's how I wound up out in the ambush place. And then I'm sitting around, and I had beers for the guys. Right?
Were you actually in a foxhole there?
Oh, yeah. Nothing else there. I mean, you weren't going to stand there waiting for somebody to come to shoot you. And that night, Dugan was sleeping on a thing, and I was laying in his foxhole. He gave you his foxhole. You laid on the top, put like a poncho down, and laid right there, snoring away. I didn't sleep a wink. I didn't close an eye. Anyway, we went back in when the sun came up the next morning. Now that's the second night I'm there. I was still could make it.
Yeah.
And so later
you still
on,
had Pappas. You still had Pappas to get, right?
yeah, still had Pappas. I'd gotten to 3 guys in 2 days. Impossible. If with orders, it would have been possible.
That's crazy.
And about 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, a Chinook came in, and I knew this was a Marine Chinook. So I said, he'll take me over to that guy. Let me talk to that guy. Because I was only a couple of years out. I could speak the language and everything. I knew my serial number, my rifle number, all of that sort of stuff. So, yeah, okay, come on. Go over there. And he says, hey, can you give us a lift here? Where are you going? And to the anywhere. To the airfield, near the airfield? Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, I drop you off right by the airfield. Yeah. Come on in. So I jumped in, and that was it. And they took me to a field, I don't know how many miles away, maybe 5, 10, 15, whatever. And they let me off, and they said, the airport's right down that road there. So I started walking down the road. Again, nothing, no houses, no nothing, just dirt, right? And I see, and you can see the dust coming before you hear the vehicle. And I see the dust coming up, and it's going my way towards the airfield. So I waved to the guy and said, hey, and I put my thumb out, hitchhiking, right? And it was a couple of Marines, 2 Marines in the Jeep. So they slowed down, they looked at me, and they kept going. I said, hey, Jarhead, I'm from New York. You're from New York? What are you doing here? So it's a long story, but they took me to the airfield, and another Marine, maybe a couple of 100 yards away, there was a plane. You could see it's getting ready to go. And I said, I got to get on that plane. I'm heading south. The other way, maybe a half a mile away, was the DMZ. At the most, it was a half a mile away. So it can only go one way, south. Mm-hmm. So I said, I got to head south. He says, well, I'm not allowed to let any civilians through this gate. I looked at me. I said, Corporal, I'm sorry. I can't miss that plane. I got to get a ship first thing in the morning. So I'm going to go over to that plane. If you want to send somebody with me, that'd be fine. So I said, you can send one of your chasers here. It's fine with me, but I got to get on that plane. So I go over to the plane. And now they're really trying to close the door. I said, hey, hold it. Where you going? And they said, Phuket. Oh, I got to get down to Phuket. I didn't even heard of Phuket. Where's Phuket? It's just above Ankei, where my ship should have been.
So, so you get back to the ship and it's gone.
Gone. So then I went to the Coast Guard guy, the U.S. Coast Guard. They ran the harbors for all the American military. Yeah. And I told them, my ship, they said it left early. There was a rumor of some attack coming, so they got out of here last night. So the guy said, all right, get the papers from Saigon and get them up here. I'll put you in the hotel over there. I said, no. Why don't I just go down to Saigon and get the papers myself? It'll save me some time, So he says, there's no way you can get down to Saigon without flying. You can't fly anywhere around here without orders. I'm looking at this guy. I just flew back and forth across half the country, and I had no orders. And by the way, I had Collins get back with me now. All right? So he says, no. I said, all right, thanks. I left. I said, Collins, can you take me back to the airfield? He says, yeah. So the same thing. Military jeep, military police, right through all the security, right into now I know the scene. At the end of every runway, there's a tent. And in that tent is like the operations. So I stood outside that tent. And this guy comes out. And I said, hey, are you going south? He says, yeah. Who the hell are you? I said, my name is Chickie Donohue, and I'm trying to get to Saigon. My ship is down there, and it's sailing tonight, and I got to get on it. And so he says to me, wait right here, and if I come to the door and I go like this, just come, get in the door. There's a seat immediately to the right of the door. Sit there, put your belt on, and shut your mouth. And he goes in, comes to the door. I run over there, go in the thing, sit in the seat, close the belt, shut my mouth, I say nothing to nobody, and he comes down like he forgot to tell me something. And he says, if I wasn't a merchant seaman during World War II, I would have left your rotten ass standing on the tarmac. So I said, thanks. And then when we get off the plane in Saigon, he said to me, hey, fella, do me a favor, will you? I said, yeah, what's that? Take a shower. I stunk.
Yeah.
It was great. It was great. It was all normal guys acting like normal guys in a place that nothing was normal.
Yeah.
Flew me to Saigon, and I get off, and I headed to the consul.
Did you actually get back on the ship that you came on, or you got on a different ship?
Oh, that ship, by then, it was 24 hours sailing already, so it was maybe halfway to the Philippines. But no, they would have left Vietnam, went the closest American port was a big naval base at Subic Bay in the Philippines. They tried to hook me up with them in the Philippines, but they couldn't get it done. I had to get a visa. I didn't even have a passport. I had to get a passport, all of these things. And it was bureaucracy.
So how did you actually get on your way home?
Well, as soon as I got a visa, they would try to get me on a ship. And the only way they could get me on a ship was they had to been short a seaman. And even then, they didn't like taking people from there. Meanwhile, they were attacking Saigon all during this time. And one of the ships that I run into a friend was the SS Limon, Limon. It was originally a banana boat that actually picked up bananas in Central America and brought them to the States. The Americans used it as a refrigerator ship. It sailed to Vietnam from the United States, and the whole ship was a big refrigerator, and they had all sorts of food there. And obviously, during the Tet Offensive, there was no restaurants or anything open in the beginning for a number of days. So the port was closed. Everything was closed the first couple of days in Vietnam. So my seaman's papers got me into the port. I said, you got to let me in. It's my ship over there. All right. So they let me in on the basis I'm a seaman.
So you finally get back on a ship, right? It was a ship or a plane? How'd you get back home?
Same ship. That same ship. It got hit one night while I was there. Not on the ship. I was in the hotel. And the oiler was wounded. And they took him to the hospital. And he couldn't get back on the ship when the ship was ready. And
is this the refrigeration ship?
Yeah.
The banana? Oh, okay.
So a couple of days later, maybe almost a week or so after that guy was wounded, and they knew for sure he wasn't coming back, the captain said, we're leaving. They emptied the ship, and we're leaving. So I said, hey, I'm an oiler. And I knew the contract. By that time, I knew all the guys and blah, 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 blah. So they went up to the captain. They brought me up there, answered a few questions, and the captain, he originally was going to sail without. He'll sail short and pay overtime. So those guys were nice. There was two other guys. There's three oilers on every ship, and one was gone, so they only had two, and they would have got an extra 4 hours a day overtime every day for a couple of weeks at least. But they said, no, hire him, get the guy out of here, which was how I got home. Took me to Seattle. That's where it took me.
Oh, all right. So from Seattle, you had to get back to New York now.
Leave the ship, take a cab I said, take me to a department store. I got to buy some clothes. I walked around the men's department and I bought everything that I had on me. Underwear, socks, shoes, everything that I had on me, I bought new. and carried it into the change room. Took everything off me, left it right there.
I was going to ask you, did you throw it out?
I just left it right there, practically where it fell. And I get in a cab and take me to the airport. So I'm drinking in the bar, and they actually sent one of the officers went to the bar to get me and bring me to the plane. By that time, they realized I was coming back from Vietnam. I was acting strange. I was strange, and I was acting strange. And then I'm getting stranger because I'm half stewed. So there's a guy sitting there next to me, and he says, where you coming from? I don't know. I didn't want to talk to the guy. Yeah, just leave me alone. He says, you want a drink? Okay, he's speaking my language. Yeah, I want a drink. He says, what do you drink? I said, whatever you're drinking, I'm drinking. He says, good. So he ordered a martini of some kind. I never drank a martini in my life. All right. Hey, this is pretty good. By the time I got off that plane in New York, I was stewed to the Mickey. I get off the plane, I get in the cab, take me to Doc Fiddler's.
That was your first place. You went right to Doc Fiddler's.
Right back to the bar.
So what was it like when you walked in the bar?
Well, a guy was coming out of the bar. He says, hey, it's Chickie. He's getting out of a cab. He's here, and he's alive. So I went into the bar, and yay, drinks on the house, and all that. So we just had a party. A week or two before, one of the guys I found, Ricky Dugan, who was up on the DMZ, the guy up in LZ Jane.
Yeah.
Dugan's father was in the hospital, and they thought he was going to die. He was very sick. They sent Dugan home to be with his father, who they thought was dying. But he didn't die. But he was home, and he went to Doc Fiddler's.
And he beat you home.
He beat me home. Yeah.
Now, when you first walked in the bar, was the Colonel bartending? Do you remember first seeing him? Like, what did he say when he first saw you?
He said, who did you see? I know you found Dugan. Did you see Collins? I said, yeah, I saw Collins. He says, good. I think he was friends with the mother, the immigrant Irish lady.
So let me ask you this, Chick. Obviously, years go by. This whole story about the greatest beer run ever, your book, the movie, that's so many years later. How many times did you tell this story in the pub or any pub?
Well, first of all, it would have been in any pub I went in, almost. Okay? And there was enough pubs in Inwood and all around New York that there was never lacking a pub in the vicinity. And I went in, and if they don't know you, say, where are you from? I said, I'm from around here. What do you do? I said, I just come back from Nam. I'm a merchant seaman. Oh, yeah. And then I'd get into the story. But yes, I tell that story thousands of times.
We talked before about, so many small world stories that you encountered on this entire journey of yours. And another small world story just erupted just since I spoke to you. This trip of yours must just have like this umbrella over it or something. The day that I spoke to you on the phone, that same morning was the day I was doing a podcast for a friend of mine who is the Irish step dance teacher for my daughter. My daughter was an Irish step dancer for 12 years, and I thought she would be a good person on the podcast. So I did hers last week, but I spoke to you right before I spoke to her. And then I spoke to you again after my podcast was over with her. So it's just a lot of organizing and planning.
Yeah.
And her podcast went live a few days later. And right after it went live, I got a call from a guy by the name of Wayne Holleran. I'm not sure if you know Wayne. You might know his brother Dick. He was an Inwood guy. He gives me a call. Wayne. I know Wayne from 75 Engine. That was my first firehouse when I got on the job in the Bronx on Jerome Avenue.
Yeah.
And Wayne gives me a call, and he says, Timmy, you should really interview this guy, Chickie Donohue. He's an Inwood guy. And I said, Wayne, not only do I know about the greatest beer run, but Chickie's on my podcast tomorrow. I'm recording him tomorrow. And then Wayne says, oh, you got to be kidding me. And he says, well, here's another thing. He says, the girl that you just did the podcast with, Debbie Lynch, her father is Bill Lynch, his brother is the Colonel. Is the Colonel.
Yeah.
So I couldn't wrap my head around that I just booked 2 people to be on this podcast, and you're both connected.
50 years after Vietnam. 50 plus years after Vietnam.
It's such a crazy small world story. So Debbie and her dad, I know, are going to be watching this podcast, your podcast. Okay. So is there any specific memory that you can share of Bill's brother George on here that they'd like to hear? Maybe
George. When you call him George, you mean the Colonel?
The Colonel, yeah.
Well, I've seen Bill a number of times after that, and I don't know, George was a legend, a living legend in Inwood, the Colonel. George told me he was overseas in the Army, and he was in Germany, and he worked in the motor pool. I said, well, what rank did you receive? I think he might have been a PFC. He might have made PFC. But everybody in Inwood called him the Colonel. And he was just a super duper patriot. Remember the movie George Patton? The movie?
Yeah, Patton.
Well, George Lynch hired a stretch limo and put on a tuxedo and went to the world premiere of Patton in New York with a date. I thought you'd think he was going off to be married or something with the date and the and all of this. And George was the classic, great Inwood character. I don't know any negatives. Everybody has negatives.
Yeah.
No
negatives with the Colonel.
No negatives with the Colonel. But he was just a great guy. And I think he worked at every bar in Inwood. Not because he couldn't hold a job. He had a crowd that followed him.
Right.
Where are we going? Maybe 50 bars from Dykeman Street up to Baker Field. I don't know. Where's the Colonel working this week? I think he's working in the Willow or something. So we go to the Willow. Done that many times.
That's great. So when you did come back, you ended up buying a couple bars, you told me once before. Right? Yeah. You got into the bar scene. Was that before or after the Sandhogs? Where does all that play in?
Oh, I played in right after I came home. When I come home in 68, I got home, I think it was in April. And the 2 guys who owned it, Tommy, I forget his last name, Tommy and Richie Shinnick, I remember Shinnick's last name. They were the owners. And they bought a steakhouse up in Riverdale. I forget the name of this steakhouse. And it was on top of the Riverdale Hill. Fancy place, catering hall. And they were going to go in the steakhouse business. And I don't know too many Irish guys who made great in the steakhouse business. All right. Bar business? Yeah. Okay. So taking care of Doc Fiddlers was causing them to ignore their new business. So I became a half-ass celebrity at that time. And I knew both Richie and Tommy all my life. I don't know if I initiated it or they initiated it. They said, why don't we just sell the place? Get the hell out of here. Get some money and, it'll help you in the new business. So they said, would you buy this place? I said, yeah, I'll buy it. Sure. I had no money, but I'll buy it. So they said, we'll sell it to you. How much would it cost me? So he told me. So I couldn't afford that. So I went and I found a buddy of mine who lived right around the corner, Jerry O'Sullivan. And his brother owned the place on Broadway, the Sloop, near Dykeman Street. And I said, listen, I can buy Doc's. Why don't you be my partner? We'll go into Doc's. And he got money from his mother. I got money from the jukebox guy. In those days, the jukebox guy would give you money, a loan. $10,000 was a typical amount of money. He'd give you a loan as long as he can have his jukebox and his other machines there. The year was 1969.
How long did you have that?
I had that till 73, maybe 72. And then, of course, I thought I was a big, real smart bar operator and everything, you know. Our accountant come in, he says, you're doing good here, he says. I know a number of guys that give you 50, 60,000 for this. $60,000 for this bar? He says, yeah. So I told my partner said, no, Chickie, we can't sell this. I said, Jerry, I can't. So we made a deal, Jerry and I. He bought me out. And I thought I was the brains of the operation. Okay? And I really wasn't. Jerry really contributed a lot to that place. But I'd worked the bar. Jerry did the morning, come in.
Were you a Sandhog at this time?
No, not yet. Not yet. But I was a couple of months in there, and I tell you the story about O'Sullivan comes in, another Sullivan. And he said, Chickie, will you cash my paycheck? I says, yeah, sure. Let me see. I looked at it. $750? I said, who the hell is paying you $750? And he says, I'm a Sandhog. I says, that's a father-son union. It's a father-son, you can't. He said, you can get in there. My father had died maybe 6 months before. And my father always told me, if you could get a book in a father-son union, get it, pay the dues, put it up on the shelf. Someday you want to add something to the back of the house or something, you go work a few weeks. They're the highest paid laborers in the world. So that's what I did. I got a book.
I gotta tell you, all those Sandhogs, all the guys that I ever knew that were Sandhogs, I mean, unbelievable. Jimmy Diamond.
Oh,
Jimmy McCluskey.
I spoke to Jimmy yesterday.
And how about, did you ever know, did you know Dennis Devlin?
Oh, yeah, I knew. Okay, this is it.
He was my captain in the fire department.
Listen to this. It's the Labor Day parade. And Labor Day was on a Saturday that year. And they come marching up the avenue. And I was the political guy for the Sandhogs. So here's Dennis in uniform carrying the banner with other guys, UFOA.
Yep.
All right. And I knew some of them guys. All right. And I'm standing on the side. Hey, Dennis. Hey, Chickie, come on out. So I went out and I was marching up Labor Day with Dennis. He's standing right on my left. And who came out of a car on the side street there and come out to see where he was going to join the parade was Governor Pataki. And I knew Governor Pataki from when he was an assemblyman, and Jimmy McGowan, the Jimmy McGowan. Yeah,
I know Jimmy well. I was going to ask if you know.
Not the son.
I know. Yeah, Jimmy, and he's passed now. He passed.
Yeah, I know. Ago. I was there at his funeral, and Tiggy. I was with Tiggy playing. He was playing his drums and everything at Jimmy McGowan's funeral. Anyway, hey George, come on! I did the same thing Dennis did. Hey Chickie, come on, join us. I said, hey George, come on. Everyone's looking at me. He come out, and he got alongside of us. So it was George Pataki, Dennis Devlin, and Chickie Donohue marched up that Saturday before 9/11. That's the first time I've told that story.
Wow.
Yeah, all great.
He was Dennis was my captain, and he had just gotten promoted to battalion chief. So he was covering battalion chief and ended up dying on 9/11. He was a great man. Great. I have great stories about him.
We named our education funds and everything, and our scholarship, our annual scholarship, is the Dennis Devlin Scholarship.
Okay.
And Hugs. Yeah. Yeah, he was a great guy.
The motto on his the T-shirt was "No ordinary man."
Well, that fits.
Which is true. He was no ordinary man.
As a Sandhog and as a firefighter, no ordinary job.
Yeah. Hey, look, Chickie, it's been really great. I'm really glad that we did this together, and I really appreciate you coming on the show. We will definitely get together in the near future.